Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Silicon Global Ask a VC series. This is probably our 66th episode since April 2020, which is when we started this show because COVID prevented us from doing our regular events live. So we've been doing these events online, which has been kind of nice, a nice series to get going. And today we're going to be welcoming Ryan Mendoza, who you probably see on the screen right now.
Mm.
Hi, Ryan. How are you today?
Good, good. How are you, Rebecca? Hey,
Good.
everyone.
All right. So just a little introductory remarks before we get going with the Q&A with Ryan. And then I'm going to, after we do the Q&A, open up to your questions as well. So anyhow, a little bit about me, a couple of books. I've been trend spotting geographically from Asia, China to Asia to China to the heartland and back. 4 books since 2008 and working on another one. For those who have just joined us today for the first time, we have our Circle membership. You can check that out. That entitles you to come to our live events and our online events. Our next live event is going to be in San Francisco. It's all about AI, and we have 3 next gen VCs are going to be talking about AI. That's on October 30th in the morning in downtown San Francisco. So look forward. You can check all that out on our website, silicondragonventures.com. So today we're going to be welcoming Ryan to the show. He's here in the Bay Area. And just to tell you a little bit about Ryan, so you can memorize everything that's on this slide. He joined this Japanese-based firm, Scrum Ventures, in 2018. Before that, he was an assistant director at PCI Ventures, which was a very interesting post where he was in charge of accelerating innovation and startups from University of Penn Technology Research, the engineering lab. So we got to see a lot of really interesting startups then, cool technology, and he then became on the board of directors of some of these startups. Before that, he was doing a lot of other interesting things, including electrical engineer at Lockheed Martin. Wow. And a VP engineering at a materials science startup, which I think was a spin out from UPenn, right, Ryan?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay. So master's degree in electrical engineering and electronic engineering, right?
Yes, that's also correct. Yep.
Okay, University of Pennsylvania. Bachelor's degree. Pennsylvania is the big state, as we know, coming up. Uh,
That's right.
and bachelor's degree from USC, also engineering focused. Scrum Ventures. Okay, in case you haven't heard of it, it's based in Tokyo, founded in 2013, founded by a Japanese fellow who's a very seasoned IT exec and experienced founder. And I'd love to ask Ryan a little bit more about his background. But before I do that, just let me give you the short version of Scrum Ventures here. They invest in tech startups at an early stage. They have 5 funds. 4 are in the flagship fund track, which means early stage tech in a general sense, and then 1 vertical fund for sports and entertainment. It's approximately $200 million in capital under management. Interesting thing about Scrum Ventures is that they partner with Japanese corporates. So that means Panasonic, Sony, Mitsubishi. They also have a studio that helps to expand startups to Japan. And 30% of the portfolio is in Japan. But Ryan is basically in charge of what's happening in the US. So we're going to talk to Ryan today about that part of the portfolio and how Scrum Ventures helps these US companies to expand into Japan. So, okay.
Yeah.
So here we go. Hi,
Okay.
everyone.
Thank you, Rebecca, for
Yeah.
that intro. Yeah. Maybe quickly, just a quick point there. So we're actually headquartered in the U.S. We started operations for Scrum in the U.S. And we have an office in Tokyo, Japan. We are investing in Japanese startups and managing our network of corporate partners, and we can go through all the kind of nuances and details of how we support startups with connecting with our partners. But yeah, we actually formed as San Francisco based back in 2013 was when we launched our first fund. And as you noted, manage 5 funds now, over 200 million in assets under management. Can expand a little bit on the tracks, but yes, fourth early stage generalist fund track at the moment. And then we launched our first vertical focus fund in the sports and entertainment world,
Mhm.
starting at the end of 2021. And so that's an
Mhm.
active investment vehicle at the moment.
Mhm.
So just a little bit more background there.
Okay, interesting. So these generalist funds, then what do you have any particular technology that you kind of favor at the moment?
Yeah, so we do. I think, I think blessed by the opportunity to be generalist fund, to be honest. And I think strategically, that's why we're early stage as well. We want to find these unique opportunities where startups and entrepreneurs are building really interesting, innovative new technologies and have the opportunity to disrupt industries. And so that's what we look for. We know that, and we believe that technology, particularly AI and others, has the potential to really disrupt and change the way we think about and the way these industries operate. So we don't silo ourselves to specific areas.
Mhm.
Uh, Over our lifespan of our first fund to now, that perspective has changed a bit as far as what we're currently looking at. And I'll mention at the moment, we're very much looking at AI, of course, the applications of AI, and some on the infrastructure side, and we have some thoughts and thesis around that as well. We're also looking at climate tech. We're looking at robotics across industries as well. We look at enterprise software as well. Um,
Mhm.
Healthcare is another big area of interest for us. Um, I think a good way to kind of think about us, define us, is we're interested in the globalization of technology. And so, we think that there's issues in the US, societies in the US and in Japan around labor shortage, climate change, aging demographics, et cetera, that are not just localized to the US and Japan. These are global problems, and technology can be well suited to solve these. And so we want to create communities and opportunities for new technologies to distribute, to be developed, to help solve some of these. So a lot of the efforts, Japan and US, but we have some grand visions about expansion, other pockets of the world as well. So
All right. So the Japan heritage is based upon the founder of the venture firm. And could you tell us a little bit more about his background?
yeah, certainly. So Tak Miata is a Japanese entrepreneur. He lives in the Bay Area here now, close to San Francisco. He's a serial entrepreneur, started several tech companies prior. He had started a computer vision startup years ago that he sold to Google. So really pioneering early in the computer vision space. Sold to Google around 2008, I believe it was. Uh,
Hmm.
he served as the CEO of the Americas for Mixi, spelled Mixi. Mixi is the large social media company in Japan, and so he was tasked with bringing that over into the U.S. and being the CEO here. Um, he founded Scrum in 2000, really 2000 kind of 12. Things got
Hmm.
got rolling. We launched our first fund in 2013. That was the vintage year, investing mostly in the US. That was started with one Japanese LP, and then things have expanded from there, right? We have a whole host of many different Japanese LPs across different industries. Now we manage a network of around 100 corporate partners, and support through a variety of different programs and structures for helping startups interact with, partner with, and co-develop with our partners. So
Okay, well, good. Since you talked about AI in particular, there's a question we have from our audience about what verticals in AI are you looking at?
yeah, we're looking at a few. So I think we're looking at productivity in the enterprise for one. That can span a lot of different use cases, of course. But for example, we've invested in companies using generative AI for a few different applications somewhat recently. One of them is a financial platform
Mhm.
automating bookkeeping and accounting for startups. Um, we've also invested in a company that manages the intellectual property operations of an organization that, say, develops lots of intellectual property internally. So there's whole processes around how they value intellectual property, how they think about developing and filing patents for new ones, and then the actual process of writing patents. And AI in a lot of those different pieces of that intellectual property journey can have a really big impact on improving the productivity. Um, so I wouldn't say that we look at specifically, procurement. We need to attack procurement with AI, just as an example. But we're looking for opportunities for where AI can increase productivity and have an economic impact for the stakeholders around that workflow.
Mhm.
Um, and then we're looking at AI in some other angles as well, in healthcare, for example, in health IT, improving the operations and efficiencies of healthcare settings and organizations, as well as analytics tools for remote patient monitoring. And so those are just a few. I think, at a high level, we're looking at the opportunity to increase productivity, increase our economic output with AI, which has also led us down the road of looking very much at robotics at the moment as well.
Mhm.
So the marrying now of robotic hardware with intelligent systems.
Mhm.
Um,
Well, and
that's
Japan is very big in robotics, so that would be a natural for your firm to invest in. But are there other areas that are natural areas that you say you would invest in this company because you think you could help it expand in Japan?
Yeah, yeah, that's a good question about our kind of strategic alignment with partners and with Japan. So, there's not a strategic angle with our investments necessarily. So we don't have a strategic tie to the needs of our LPs and our corporate partners when we invest. That's why we're set up as a generalist to have a pretty big purview on the markets and technology. Um, However, we do like to get a good sense of how we can support companies, right? We like to develop a strong support plan and make sure that we're the best investor for this company and can add a lot of value. So when we're certainly analyzing a company, we're looking at how we can connect them, how we can provide distribution, partnerships, customers. That doesn't initially have to be, with expansion into Japan, which is often not the case initially. Um, and so, we don't have a very strategic lens with, how do we fit this company with this LP? But we think of it as a community approach. How can we bring on this company, add value from our broader community and our variety of resources we provide? Um, so, Japan is looking at, and the market in Japan are looking at a lot of areas of overlap in robotics and AI, climate, etc. Um, and then there's some nuances as well. So we have investments in startups in Japan that are different, right? Different business models, different product that clearly are for the Japanese market, and that's okay. And we invest in those companies from our Japanese operations. Um, and then there are certainly a lot of companies, particularly many in the US, that we think could translate globally as well. So there's a lot of overlap with what we look at, both areas.
Okay. There was also a quick, I mean, you're investing so broadly. I don't know how you can stay on top of all the trends in these technology areas, but you do, I suppose, because you seem to have had a very good track record of investing.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting maybe to address that. We do about 10 to 12 investments a year. So pretty active, but not the most active. There are seed funds that take the approach, the kind of spray and pray approach, right? Where
Mhm.
you invest in as many companies as you can in a vertical that you have a thesis about, and then look to follow on later as those companies progress. We are a bit more selective. And so we do, make sure we're very thorough in our analysis and our position that this company can be category defining. Um, and then selectively making decisions to invest there. So we're not structured to actively be out looking at every single industry. I think that would require an enormous team to really deep dive in a lot of them. We do, however, in those kind of particular categories around AI, healthcare, climate, etc. But for example, we've invested in some consumer technology companies recently. We've invested in e-commerce in the past. And we weren't necessarily actively out looking at the fintech market as deeply as we possibly could. Um, you know, we're opportunistic around an interesting company solving an interesting problem. We have a good radar kind of for how we're sourcing, where these companies are coming from, and why they're unique. So a lot of it comes down to kind of filtering that top of funnel into what looks unique for us.
Okay, well, there was a specific question about ag tech and space tech and medical devices
Okay.
and anti-aging. So what about that? What about those areas?
So let's see if I can recall where we started. So ag tech, I think was the first.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting things happening in ag tech. We're certainly taking a look. Um, we there's a lot in robotics for ag tech. One challenge I think folks are having with that particular technology is I think the same that a lot of industries are seeing really is point solutions in industries. I think it's more of a buying challenge, really. The way I would maybe put it is, we're building a robotic system to automate this specific process. From a buyer's perspective, say a farm operator, why do I want to automate that specific process and not the 100 others that we do, right? So I think there's some areas of ag tech where there's certainly interesting development work happening, but distribution could be a challenge. Um, but there's others as well. There's companies doing data and analytics around crop yield, etc. We've seen several of those startups come and start to scale.
Mhm.
So those are interesting businesses and companies.
Mhm.
And so we continue to look there. Haven't made a lot of investments there historically, but it's certainly relevant for us, for US and for Japan.
Okay.
Um, in space tech, I think space tech is going through an interesting time at the moment. We have made investments in space tech companies. We actually are investors in a company that just launched a couple months ago on their first CubeSats into space on one of the SpaceX flights, a company called Array Labs. What they do is operate clusters of CubeSats that can do 3D imaging of Earth. So they're using a distributed radar system that, taken from multiple angles, can reconstruct a 3D image of spots on Earth. Now, historically, radar imaging has been two-dimensional. This third-dimensional layer adds the ability to do a height analysis for all the different things people are doing
Mhm.
Earth observation for. So it's pretty powerful. So we are continuing to look at space tech as well. There's a lot of new initiatives happening, and a lot of new needs the more that we expand. So I think that market's only growing. We're seeing
Mhm.
a lot of interesting stuff in space. Um, and then what were some of the others?
Medical devices,
Mid-device. So
anti-aging.
historically we haven't. So maybe some of the areas that we don't cover as much are deep life sciences, pharmaceuticals,
Oh,
and med device.
I
Um,
see.
you know, we have before. Some of it is just a little bit of a lack of expertise. We're not deep experts in life sciences. Now, what we will invest in is things surrounding workflows around that. So
Mhm.
we did invest in an AI drug discovery company. There's been a whole host of AI drug discovery platforms and tools. This company called Oleo Labs is unique in its computational approach for finding combinational drug therapies.
Mhm.
So, a
Okay.
lot of the AI development these days is towards single target drug therapies. A combinational approach can increase efficacy, lower side effects. It's a very complex computational challenge, though, to develop a combinational therapeutic. Um,
So your LPs are mostly these Japanese corporates like Mitsubishi, Panasonic, and Sony
yeah, so
and others?
Mitsubishi and Panasonic are LPs, certainly. There's a variety of others we kind of list on the website there.
Yeah,
Some we don't mention as well.
right.
But yes, there's a whole variety of LPs across different industries.
But they're all Japanese?
They're all Japanese. Yeah, yeah.
I see.
We do have a LP that's not in Japan, corporate LP. They're actually based in South America.
Uh-huh.
Um, and so they're also a CVC. So they're also interested,
Okay.
looking at technology and innovation out of the US and Bay Area.
Okay.
But the majority are in Japan.
Do you sometimes take the lead from these corporate VCs about what to invest in?
Um, No, we do not. That kind of goes back to, the strategic investment discussion. We of course take that as insights, right? That's a data point for us as far as what our corporate partners are looking for and want. And we also have efforts to support their sourcing too, for when they are looking for things to directly invest in or partner in. We have
Mhm.
all types of programs for that. But as far as our specific investments, it's not as much taking direction from them necessarily. To be honest, I think they like the fact that we're generalists, right? They're investing in us not only to find companies for them to work with, but also to have a view and a lens into what's happening in Silicon Valley, what's happening in the Bay Area and California as well.
I
So
see.
I think they appreciate when we bring in some unique things and kind of open the aperture for perspective on startups, technology, that
I
sort of.
see. So you're investing in quite a few deals per year, and can you tell us about the exits? You have any IPOs in the pipeline? How about M&A?
Yeah, so we've had quite a few M&A, 23. Um, and we have some IPOs in Japan. So the market in Japan is different. Companies tend to go public earlier. Um, and then on the US, we certainly have a host of unicorn companies that are in the process of, and I would call them pre-IPO stage. Now, hard to define exactly when that's going to be.
Yeah.
Um, we have, example of a couple companies in the portfolio are Noom. Noom is a digital health service for weight loss. So, think a mobile digital health version of Weight Watchers, but with certainly some unique angles, leveraging, the mobile platform and so forth. Noom just launched a service offering GLP-1 drugs through their platform as well. They're doing very well. We invested, an early round for them, and things are looking good there. Another is Grub Market. Grub Market is a company we invested in, again, at the very early stage. We're several billion now. They're developing supply chain software for the food industry, specifically for managing the logistics and supply chain from farm fresh food to wholesale, retail, and even some consumer, but taking a very fragmented industry, consolidating that with software, um, and allowing for more distribution of healthy foods throughout.
Mhm.
Um, they have now added on a whole new layer of AI, a kind of AI operating system for this supply chain that has financial tools for farmers and a variety of other things as well. So that one we're very excited about. Company's doing really well also.
Okay. And so are any of these deals, are any of these companies been sold back to the Japanese LPs?
As an acquisition,
Yeah.
not as an acquisition, do we have a data point on. We certainly do for investments. So oftentimes, it's happened that our LPs will invest later, right? So we invest early stage, start to get them acquainted with them, make some introductions, and they discuss, brainstorm partnership strategies, so forth, and our LPs will end up investing in the company. So that happens. That has happened for a
I,
variety of
s-
as well.
I
Um,
see. And how many exits have you had so far from your various funds?
23.
23 exits.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
That sounds good. And these are mostly M&A.
The majority M&A. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. So, and then uh, about your Japan and US mix of portfolio companies, I understand it's about 1/3 in the US, right?
Yeah, I would say
And the rest in Japan?
it's about 2/3 in the US.
Oh, 2/3 in the
Yeah.
US.
So we started the Japan investment operations in 2018, 17, 18. So a little bit later, right? So US investment operations started 2013. So Japan's kicked off for us in Fund 3. So naturally the total portfolio was less. from our latest fund, yeah, it's closer to probably 40% Japanese startups, 60% US. But from a total portfolio perspective, it's about
Mhm.
70-30, maybe even 75-25. Um, and so yeah, we're pretty active. Like I said, from this latest fund, it's closer to 40% Japanese startups,
Okay. And how
60.
many unicorns? What's the percentage of unicorns from the overall portfolio?
Percentage of unicorns. So
Or the number of
number of
unicorns,
unicorns.
where are they
Okay, got
from?
it.
US
Yeah.
or Japan or both?
From US.
They're
Yeah.
all US, I see.
Yeah.
I
So we
see. So the value, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, part of it's because it's we didn't start those investment operations till around 2018. That's one reason. Um, but yeah, so there's a lot of companies in the portfolio from Japan, and they're still a bit more fresh, right? So
I
our
see.
unicorns for reference here
I
in
see.
the US, a lot of them were investments in 2014 kind of time frame. So it takes time for companies to
I
mature,
see.
both US and Japan.
I see. And so have you ever invested with SoftBank?
We have invested in SoftBank. We've invested in SoftBank in quite a few companies, actually.
Mhm.
SoftBank Corporate and SoftBank Vision Fund. Um, One of them is an autonomous vehicle company called May Mobility. May Mobility is building autonomous vehicles. They have a somewhat unique strategy from a technology perspective and a go-to-market perspective compared to, sort of the well-known ones, Cruise and Waymo. May
Mhm.
Mobility actually has more locations that they cover. They've also expanded into Japan. So May
Okay.
Mobility is launching, this is actually very recent,
Oh,
autonomous service in an area of Tokyo. Uh,
oh.
and so
Mhm.
that's an example. And we have a few others as well with SoftBank. So yeah, we have a relationship there.
Yeah, that sounds like a very interesting deal. May Mobility. All right. And it's
May
a
Mobility,
US
yeah.
based company that's expanded in Japan, expanded its service in Japan.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good
Okay.
example of one. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's good. So what about the Japanese economy? You've got a new prime minister.
Yeah.
What's the outlook for the Japanese economy?
It's pretty strong right now. There's kind of a lot to unpack there, but it's a really interesting time period for Japan. So it starts with really government economic reform. So new prime ministers set out on this new economic development plan, which he put into practice in 2022 to rebuild the economy across a variety of different levers. One of that was to foster innovation. So the whole kind of premise is to create and support a culture of innovation. Now that's enacted itself in a variety of different strategies. So anything from new government funding mechanisms for startups and VC funds, to things like tax incentives for VC investment into startups, to things like lowering some of the visa requirements for foreign entrepreneurs to come into Japan. Um, so that's a sample of just some of the kind of
Mhm.
strategies there. There's a lot more. Um, that coupled with like the interest rate story in Japan as well. So, negative interest rates until recently. So that was intentional to allow for a lot of investment into other asset classes and so forth. And so this all seems to be happening. It's a little bit new, it's recent, but we're seeing a lot of interesting data points around, the uptick in innovation and investment into startups and so forth in Japan. Um, Actually, and particularly from Japanese corporations as well. So this was maybe data through end of 2023, maybe Q1 24. So there could be some changes now. But when you look at a list of the most active CVCs globally, the top three were Japanese corporations. So over, any US company, et cetera. Um, so there's a lot of activity happening in Japan. It's an exciting time. Um, we're also seeing more, you know, some early signals, but of Japanese or US venture capital dollars floating to Japan. The Sakana AI deal recently is a good example of that. So Sakana AI building foundational models based in Japan just raised a really large round from, some of the big folks in the US here like NEA, Khosla, Lux, NVIDIA, etc. So.
What are you seeing in valuations in Japan? How did, and I mean, and also just in general too, because, I'm reading that VC funds are returning money, that, valuations are lower. VC is kind of sleepy right now.
Yeah, I think, under the broad context of the world, right? Globally, yes, there's less investment comparatively to other regions in Japan and less activity. But when you look at it relatively to Japan and historical data for the region, it's increasing, and it's increasing at a pretty good pace, actually. So
Uh-huh.
there are more deals being done. A lot of things in healthcare, AI, robotics, ag tech as well, space tech too. A
Okay.
lot of interesting developments there. And so rounds are picking back up. We're seeing more activity. Valuations, I think, are kind of on par to what we see in the US as well. A bit of a drop compared to, of course, 2020, 21. It follows a similar trajectory, just slightly lower across the board, I would say. So that's kind of how it looks, the picture in Japan at the moment. So,
So these Japanese corporates, they're acquirers as well. So the question is, do they pay a good price?
they, um, so yeah, I mean, there's probably a lot under that question. There is acquisition happening. I think acquisition globally is also slowing down now a little bit. Um, you know, I'm trying to recall a recent good data point around an acquisition um, that I could talk about specifically. One of the issues is the yen, of course, right? The strength of the yen. It's increasing some lately, but it's been low, and so that impacts the power of the Japanese dollar, of course, in foreign equities and acquisitions, startups, etc. Um, so it has an impact, of course. Lately the yen has been appreciating a little bit, and we'll see what happens there. But that does have a bit of an impact on, I think, on acquisitions and things like that. Um,
So do
yeah,
you get some ideas from Japan on technology innovations, or is it mostly US driven?
it's both. We try to have a good active dialogue around both and taking insights from both. Certainly, I think there's some different and kind of unique cultural aspects to the way entrepreneurs think about technology and innovation in Japan, and certainly some unique ones here in the US and Silicon Valley that can go vice versa.
Yeah,
Uh, I think Sakana AI is a good example of that, and kind of the Japanese culture as well. So, Sakana AI is building foundational models. Their whole premise is to build models on the basis of, mimicking what happens in nature, right? Schools
oh,
of fish aggregating together, birds, flocking together, and things like that. So it's they call it kind of a nature-inspired foundational model. And that kind of feels very Japanese to me.
wow, that's really cool.
Yeah. So there is some nuances to, I think, more even like just kind of the cultural approach to technology and innovation. So
Right. Well, you always think about Japanese fashion too. I mean,
yeah.
certainly, the pink hair and
Yeah.
things like that. It's the young generation of Japanese, very trendy.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Um, yeah, if you walk in Tokyo, you see a lot of that. So how often do you get to Tokyo?
Yeah, I usually just once a year for me, maybe two at
Yeah,
most. I didn't get there this year. I was last year. We have a variety of new things coming up in Japan next year, so likely we'll pick that back up. Um, but yeah, I love going when we get a chance to go. Usually
sure.
carve out some time to stay longer afterwards and
Yeah,
explore after the work stuff. So yeah, we usually host some big events in Japan, organizing startups or corporate partners, um, and that sort of thing. So we have like annual summits, LP meetings, and things like that. So
I see. Is that anything like the Pegasus model of the Startup World Cup?
Could be, could be. I'm not too familiar with that.
Well, they have these regional competitions with startups, and then the winners go on to a big global competition. And Pegasus is also tied to the Japanese corporate venture market, um, and so it's a venture capital firm that's has these annual events as well. So I was just thinking about that. It's kind of a similar model of being very tied to Japan, Pegasus. And you talked about these events. So I was just wondering, are these startup events, startup festivals where you try
Yeah.
to encourage, founders to get out there and pitch against one another for funds?
Yeah, yeah, there's a lot of those elements for sure. And it's for startups and we have a lot of different content at these events that happen. Try to make sure we have demos that people are bringing to Japan as well, if possible. We haven't done the competition, but we've talked about that, and that's actually a good idea. It's not a bad idea. So it
Okay.
could be something to look at. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, James has another question about the Japanese CVCs that are in the Bay Area, and they're using a similar playbook such as yours, or is it different?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it depends. Some of the Japanese corporations and CVCs, of course, have a presence in the US. Some don't. And then, they have varying size of
Mhm.
operations and team members. So, even if they have a small team, they still are interested in support, meaning interested in increasing the lens of things they're exposed to.
Mhm.
And that's why they do invest in venture funds as well.
Okay,
And then they're from an investment perspective, typically more strategic, right? Looking at things that are strategically a fit for them. Whether some kind of a partnership or potential for them to support with distribution in Japan, things like that.
I
So,
see.
usually pretty strategic. And then, also depends on the size of the operation here in the US.
Well, do you think your model produces better results than the kind of typical venture capital model?
Yeah, that's a good. Yeah,
There's
no,
one for you.
that's a good question. Of course. Yeah, that's
You don't have to be, don't get too sales oriented right now.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
no. No, that's a good question. I think when we're going through that effort, right, to benchmark right now.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to be fundraising for the next fund shortly.
Okay.
We look at the numbers and are, just looking purely at the returns and our performance. They are good. We look at the benchmarks for the vintage year of other funds and our numbers are strong. Um, I think it can depend. And I think it can come with scale too. I do believe that there's kind of economies of scale as we try to build out this flywheel. So I think there's opportunity for it to be even better at scale. Because what happens is the more that we interact and do these innovation programs for corporations, the more folks we bring on as partners and LPs, the more opportunities we have to support our founders, right? We have a lot of resources now, but at even further scale, that is only more of a value add, right? Um, and as you've have noted from some of the nature of these questions too, these corporations don't only operate in Japan, right? They operate globally. So you don't have to be have a localized product and team to work with, a corporate, one of these large institutional Japanese corporations. They're looking multinationally at operations and so forth.
Right.
And so I think there's some flywheel effects that start to kick in at scale and only continue to proliferate, which I believe we're seeing at the moment.
I see. You mentioned a sports and entertainment vertical fund. What's that all about?
Yeah, so this is interesting. This is actually born out of first corporate innovation programs that we're doing. So we have a variety of different corporate innovation programs. One subset of these types of programs is create a community of corporate partners in a certain industry and bring on a variety of different startups that are in that industry too. Create communities and platforms for them to collaborate, work together, and we're the facilitator, the middleman of all this. So we had done a variety of these in the sports tech world.
Yeah.
And the conversation kind of naturally flowed to a fund model, like with with the corporate partners that we were working with. We have really good teams, some strong folks that are in the sports entertainment world that, worked at the NBA and other places, worked at startups in the sports sector. So, have a background there. And so it kind of came a little bit organically. I mean, the fundraising, of course, is an effort and takes time, but the concept of it came pretty organically. And so the way we define it is sports and entertainment, also pretty broad. We know that the sports market in particular, and we can touch on entertainment in a second, but the sports markets can be somewhat small as far as TAM. So we do look for companies that, maybe this is their first market, but there's broader opportunity there. We're investing in things in the sports world in fan experiences, stadium technologies and
Uh-huh.
experience, wearables for athletes, personalized supplements and nutrition, sports betting platforms. Um, we actually invested in, so if anyone's a golf fan listening, Tiger Woods and Rory McIlroy started a new company that is a new indoor golf simulation league. And they're looking to expand this by developing teams throughout the US. So there's, teams in LA, for example, and other regions, and they're just developing this now. And so we invested in this company. It's called Tomorrow Sports. And with the discussion around supporting the expansion of the league into Japan and into Tokyo. So we're having those conversations now with them. And then in the entertainment world, this also spans broadly too. Again, taking the kind of a tech first approach of how can we apply unique technologies here. We invested in a K-pop record label, but it's a tech-enabled K-pop record label using a variety of technologies for different parts of, sourcing artists, distribution of music, things like that.
Mhm.
We also invested in a company called Fever, which is a local event discovery marketplace. So, you're visiting New York, visiting LA, visiting somewhere. You can go on the website, filter, and you get hyper local events. And they can also be personalized the more you interact with the marketplace. So this isn't like what big concerts are in New York this weekend. It's more like what are the local, like cool, interesting things that
I
I can
see.
participate in. Um, and so we invested in this company as well, and we've helped them expand into Japan as well. So now they have a variety of events and things they're doing in the countrywide now in Japan. So
Yeah, those sound very promising. There's another question, and I appreciate these questions coming from the audience.
yeah, yeah, they're great.
Keep them coming. The
Yeah.
founders of your portfolio companies, are they Japanese
Uh,
Americans? Are they Japanese? So tell us about the founders.
Yeah, that's also a good question. No, we have founders from all walks of life. Founders in our U.S. portfolio, and I'll mention too, we're focused mostly from our U.S. team in the U.S. We have invested in other regions though. We've invested in startup in Africa and Israel, and in the UK, and so forth. Um, but we're focused, for the most part on the US. But no, there are all walks of life. We're not looking for a specific cultural background when investing or anything. So, yeah,
So from anywhere.
yeah, yep.
There's not a high percentage of Japanese Americans just because of because of the, connections you might be able to make for them in Japan.
There's actually there's actually not a very large contingent of, the percentage of the US founders that are Japanese. No,
Oh.
no, yeah, yeah, all walks of life. Um,
Well, here in Silicon Valley, yeah, certainly you see more prominence today around Korea than Japan.
yeah. Yeah,
So
there's a
any
lot of
comment on that? And when you
there's a
go to
lot of
see,
activity in Korea too, for sure, around innovation, supporting innovation, startups that spill it over into the US, probably more so than Japan. But there's also a lot of collaboration too. I think, one thing that is kind of an undercurrent to all of this is the geopolitical tensions, particularly with China,
yeah,
and things like manufacturing and supply moving to other areas of Asia including
Right,
Japan, Korea, Singapore, stuff like that.
right,
Um, so with the movement of that, that also fosters innovation, things like technology for manufacturing, right? Robotics for manufacturing, AI,
right.
and other things. So Korea is part of that discussion, of course. And we do, we have good relationships with a lot of the Korean corporations as well. So
You think you might be picking up some slack left from the decline in China, US,
I
BC?
think I think so. Yeah, I think in Japan is too. And so I think we're seeing the kind of inklings of, I think, revitalization of Japan. And I think we're kind of at the forefront of that, right? I think that, we're going to see more spreading of innovation between the US and Japan, a lot of strong alliances between US and Japan from, government perspective. Um, and I think it's just only going to continue. Um,
And so in what area, when you talk about alliances, comes to mind?
well, cloud compute is a big one.
Uh-huh,
For example. So, you know, Google, AWS, all the major hyperscalers over the last couple of years have all announced huge investments in infrastructure in Japan.
I see.
Billions of dollars into data centers,
Okay,
subsea cables connecting the US and Japan, um, all that stuff. OpenAI, their first office in Asia is in Japan. And so there's it's from our perspective, we see these data points. I think it's maybe blurred from a bigger picture, but there's a lot of interesting things happening between the US and Japan.
right. Are you working with the automakers in Japan? And there's a specific question about Sumitomo as well. What about the automakers?
Um, yes, so automakers, yes. Variety of them, a lot of them. We've done specific programs for Honda, for example. And then, we're very close with all the other ones. Um, Toyota,
Sumitomo?
Toyota has their own pretty well-established ventures group, so we're more kind of a co-investor with Toyota Ventures. Now we have worked on with other groups in Toyota, but as far as kind of investments in the US, we're more friendly co-investors. Um, and then Sumitomo Life is an LP of ours, so we work closely with
What do you
Sumitomo.
work with them on?
So, they're looking at healthcare, broadly. So a lot of, so we have a couple of life insurance companies from Japan that are LPs and or partners of ours. Um, and so Sumitomo is actually participating in innovation programs. Daiichi Life Insurance is an LP of ours. And then we've also worked with Rakuten Life, Rakuten as a
Oh,
life
yeah.
insurance. They're interested broadly in digital health and healthcare, particularly things around longevity, supporting the aging demographic, and so forth. Those are pretty pertinent to their business as life insurance providers. Um, and so they're actually pretty active. All those groups pretty active in looking at digital health startups.
Okay. What about alternative energy? Because you're working with some of these automakers. I know Honda has always been, weren't they looking at hydrogen vehicles?
Yep. Yep. Hydrogen vehicles, alternative fuel sources, other types of fuel sources, right? Sustainable alternatives. They're all looking at the energy and things like that, battery technologies, and that
Yeah,
sort of
battery technologies, yeah.
and autonomous vehicles, right? I mean, every vehicle company is figuring out their autonomous strategy. So those are all commonalities
Yeah.
amongst pretty much all the OEMs, and yeah, they're very, very interested in finding some of those interesting technologies and partners.
Yeah, so some of us on the Zoom remember when the threat was Japan was taking over
Yeah,
Rockefeller Center, Pebble Beach, real estate, really coming on strong. And then that didn't happen.
yeah,
But then then the big threat became China.
yeah,
So what about today?
yeah. I mean, I'm not worried about a threat of
Is Silicon
Japan.
Valley
So
such a leader that we don't they
yeah,
don't have to worry about any threat?
I think there's more collaboration than competition and threat. I think we have our just distinct, areas of expertise and ways we complement each other more than anything else.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I don't I don't view any competitiveness or threat necessarily. No.
Yeah,
Yeah.
more collaboration on technology innovation.
Yeah.
And certainly, I'm just curious, I wonder how active these Japanese corporate VCs are compared to the total world, the universe of corporate VCs.
Yeah. Yeah, I maybe mentioned prior, and it'd be good to find the latest list, but I think it was data through Q1 of 2024, a list of, and this is, I think, through CB Insights, but the most active CVCs in the world. There's a list of the top 10. The top three are Japanese corporations. So this is relevant, recent data, um, showing that the most active corporate investors in the world are Japanese, and it's not one of them. It's not a few that are scattered in the top list. The top three are Japanese
Wow.
corporations.
And what are those three?
So it's
Do you remember?
MUFG,
I'm sorry.
MUFG. So MUFG, which is Mitsubishi Group Bank, well, one of the largest banks in Japan, but also one of the largest banks in the world, actually,
Mhm.
is MUFG. Um, they are the most active, or were as of this data set from, I think it was Q1 24. Um, SMBC, also a bank. So the banks are very active in investing. Um, and then the other was um, Mizuho, I believe it was,
Oh, okay.
another holding company and bank. Um, so, the way
Oh,
organizations are structured in Japan is holding companies that run many different types of businesses and business units. Um, Often the capital activities are from the banking group, right? So
right.
that's why you see their banking unit as the top when it comes to like investment data and so forth. So
Hmm. Interesting.
yeah, so a lot of activity. Yeah.
Okay. And how involved is your founder in making the decisions on which portfolio companies you invest in?
Yeah, he's active. So we have he's GP of all of our funds. We have a co-GP for our sports and entertainment fund, but our four early stage generals funds, he's the GP on all those. Um, we have a committee, and so I'm involved in the committee. My counterpart in Japan, who leads Japan investment operations, is part of the committee, and then our head of finance is as well. And so, we're making group decisions. Ultimately as GP, those decisions are up to him, but we convene and have a conversation for a reason, right? To take everyone's feedback and so forth. And so, um, yeah, our decision process is pretty, there's a lot that goes into it, not more from kind of an analysis perspective. Again, we're not investing in hundreds of companies of years. We're investing in 10 to 12.
Mhm.
We want to make sure we find the best. And so
Mhm.
with that comes process uh,
Mhm.
through our diligence and so forth. So,
Is he kind of a maverick like Masayoshi-san?
um, I wouldn't say a maverick. He's a really, really good entrepreneur. He's a great entrepreneur. Um, I mean, the amount of different types of programs that we launch from kind of a corporate innovation perspective, um, the different opportunities he brings to the table for us, the platform he's building. He's an entrepreneur that is doing it through a VC fund. So he's a very good entrepreneur.
So he has a real passion for technology innovation.
Yeah, yeah,
And I assume that you do too, based upon your background from University of Pennsylvania, working with all of those that innovations stemming from the engineering labs.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I do. And my kind of background has been more hardware, really. So, I was an electrical engineer at Lockheed Martin, then studying materials and material science at UPenn, working at a material science startup. And then I was at this incubation group that was translating research from universities at Penn, spinning them out into startups, and then
Yeah.
helping kind of scale from 0 to 1. And I was mostly in charge of the research labs at the university and the physical science lab. So You know, I was working with robotics companies, hardware companies, and things like that. So,
Okay. Well, it's a great background because a lot of stuff has gone toward hardware these days. Um, and okay, another question from our listeners out there. Which known VCs have offices in Japan?
um, yeah. Oh, so this is an interesting point, actually. So some maybe have heard the news. There was an article that got released a while back that Andreessen Horowitz was launching an office in Japan. Um, we corroborated with them.
Uh-huh.
That's not the case. They have not launched an
Oh,
office
no.
in Japan. I'm not sure how that info was made public and released. Um, I think they're exploring, like a lot of VCs are. Um, there's been a lot of discussion around some of the big VCs setting up shop. NEA was talking about it, Sequoia and stuff like that. Um, I'm not sure that there's been a lot of actual implementation of large US VCs opening up shops in Japan.
Because they went to China, they went to India,
Yeah,
and some to Singapore now,
Singapore. Yeah, yeah,
Indonesia, but you don't hear too much about them going into Japan and opening
yeah.
offices in Japan,
I think it's still exploratory. We
or even
get
investing in Japan.
yeah, I think it's all kind of new and fresh, and it's starting to happen. I think we look at like Sakana as a good example, right? But that is one data point. There's others too. Um, but it's all kind of fresh and starting to happen. But we get outreach all the time from other funds wanting to learn about Japan, considering setting up shop and
Yeah.
having an investment entity in the region and wanting to know the lay of the land and exploring it. So not a lot of data points yet, but I think there will be in the near
Is
future.
Scrum Ventures trying to be one of those known firms?
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're trying to raise your profile then
Yeah. Yeah. That's the
and
goal.
grow. And so what's the outer limit? What's
Yeah, I mean, I think ideally it's a platform globally for connecting startups and corporations to innovate together. Um, there's kind of within that rooted a belief that corporations and startups, historically, startups never wanted to work with corporations until they grew up and were looking for strategic partnerships, etc. We think that they can and should at an earlier stage. They can each bring their unique assets to accelerate the pace of innovation.
Mhm.
Startups have agility and new tech, corporations, resources, capital, talent, etc. We think they can work together, and it doesn't have to be competitive and stepping on each other's toes. That can be done in a way that is mutually beneficial and accelerates
Right.
the solutions that we're all aiming for. So, um, we think of ourselves as a platform growing globally, corporations and startups fostering innovation. I think strategically we would look at other pockets of Asia as far as building out the corporate networks where we have some relationships and are adjacent. So Korea, Singapore, etc. We're
Okay.
also building up a large network in the US as well. We're actively doing that. Um, have a lot of co-investors in the US with corporations and work with on a variety of fronts and introducing, supporting our portfolio companies with working with them and so forth. So
Well, how big is your team? It sounds like you're doing so much. I mean, you
yeah,
guys must be working nonstop.
yeah. We have what we do, but but we so there's the time change element as well, right? So
Right.
that's always fun to navigate. But we have about 35 folks on the team now.
35 on the team. I
Yeah.
see.
So about half in the US, half in
I
Japan.
see.
So
And what about Australia? You doing anything in Australia? This is gonna be our last question because we gotta.
Australia. Not a lot specifically or proactively. We have some ties to Australia through a variety of initiatives, some startups in the mining sector that have partners there,
Uh-huh.
some investors who, are connected and are from Australia. Um, so, we have some kind of opportunistic contacts that we've made. We're nothing proactive in Australia that though. I think
Okay.
there's some interesting markets evolving there though.
Yeah. Yeah. Canva's the biggest success story from Australia.
Of course. Yeah.
Okay, one last question before you go. What's your biggest success story, your biggest successful portfolio company?
Well, Grub Market so far
Grub
is
Market.
so the one we talked about. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you drive in, maybe real quickly, if you drive in through San Francisco, coming from south on 101, there's a big Grub Market AI billboard right before you get into the city. And so that's the Grub Market I'm talking about.
What does the billboard say?
It says Grub Market AI, I think.
That's it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you got to look it up.
You're supposed to get it.
Yeah.
Right. All right. Well, this has been very educational. Thank you so much. And
Definitely. Yeah.
we look forward to hearing more about your firm
Well,
and
thanks for having me
your
on.
own career and your founder's career. And yeah, so maybe see you at CES. You're doing a lot of hardware, so that would make sense.
We are going to be at CES. We're going to be hosting a happy hour at CES as well one of the days. So, anyone feel free to ping me on LinkedIn or anything as
Okay.
well. And so,
Yeah, we do an event in Vegas. So if you're available January 7th,
good. Good.
love to have you participate.
Yeah, that'd be great. Good.
Okay,
Okay.
makes sense. All right, well, good. Thanks a lot. I really appreciate it, everyone. Thank you for the questions. We're going to share this out on our usual channels, and we'll see you next time.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate
All
it.
right,
Bye.
take care. Bye-bye.